Welcome back to another episode of Coaches Exploring the Untethered Soul. And this week we're looking at Chapter 11, Pain, the Price of Freedom. And the first sentence in the chapter reads, "One of the essential requirements for true spiritual growth and deep personal transformation is coming to peace with pain." And this was a really interesting chapter.
Don't people get into spirituality to avoid pain? To get away from pain?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the gist of the chapter is going through the pain gets you to a place where you no longer are in pain or experiencing the pain. I don't know, as a person with, I don't know, whatever I'm up to now, 5 tattoos, being tattooed kept coming to mind through this chapter in terms of the experience of pain. I'm like, why would I do this to myself?
It's such an interesting question.
Yeah.
Because I go to circus class and do things like trapeze, and it hurts. That bar is hard, but I keep on going back because there's something in it for me.
In both cases, it sounds like, now I could be totally wrong, you guys have a different attitude towards pain. Like there isn't the same kind of meaning that perhaps you'd attach for the pain that you don't like.
Yeah, for sure. It's a different flavor, for sure.
Yeah, I would say that's true.
Yeah.
So is pain, sorry, please.
Sorry, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Elaine, so is pain an issue when we actually put an overlay on it? Like, it's bad, it's wrong, it means this about me, it means that about me. That's when it becomes heavy. That's when it becomes an issue.
That was my gist of this chapter in terms of the experience can be the same. It's just in one case we attach pain to it, and in other times we don't.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's an aspect of like how far you see in a metaphorical sense, because I'm kind of thinking in your two examples, both the bar and the trapeze, and Greg's tattoos. It's almost as if the focus has jumped the pain and is going to like the result, the feeling of fulfillment or satisfaction, or the lovely picture on your arm or whatever it is, for whatever reason. And if when we're feeling the pain that Micheal Singer is talking about, it's because we haven't been able to, let's say, locate where we're actually going to in time, sort of thing. Because if we're just trying to avoid the pain, let's say, okay, so it's painful he spoke about rejection. Let's say it's painful this might be relative to me. It's painful to, I'm going to put it in simple terms, ask for money. Okay, so ask to be paid, or ask for acquiring some sort of material benefit, for whatever painful reason. And it would seem to be that in that kind of situation, that, or again, as he speaks mainly about rejection in the chapter, it's as if it's like not worth it, as if there's some value on the amount of pain that's somehow worth keeping. I'm not quite sure exactly what I'm saying myself here, but it's just some of the words are kind of falling out of my mouth.
What he says is, it's in the cases that you're talking about, Elaine, it's more a fear of something is driving you to avoid talking about money. Where in my case or Greg's case, we're not afraid of what might happen.
Yeah.
Because if you will, our end result is something we really want, and it's just the price of admission. We accept it.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, and it sounds like the quantity, if you like, of pleasure at the other end, for some, I don't know whether it's a perceptual distortion. I can't imagine in a Western world how people wouldn't want to reach the end, let's say, financial result. And yet, like, it sounds as if the awareness, you're aware, Greg's aware that a needle hurts when it jabs into his skin to put the tattoo on. You're aware that the trapeze is hard, and you could even fall on the floor. You could actually be spinning around in circles and fly off and break your neck. I mean,
I guess it's possible,
happen,
yeah.
And but that's sort of in a quantity sense, that pain actually isn't enough to stop you from doing it yet, depending on people's perception. So in my case, like, I perceive that it's a quantity-wise thing, much more difficult, much more painful to ask for money, let's say. So where does that kind of fit in? Is it really just the perception, or is the pain that Micheal Singer talks about, does it have a physical feeling that can indeed be somehow subjectively quantified?
Yeah, I love the discussion and the point you're raising, Elaine. I'm wondering, like, in the context of money, because money is a perception too. So I'm wondering if it's all relative, perception versus perception. So in that
Subjective,
case,
perhaps.
right.
Yeah.
I like his metaphor. I don't know if it was in this chapter or the previous one, of when I've been listening to on his podcast, about, like, when you're driving, it's just the white lines on the road going by, like, as a metaphor for just, you let things flow through, whereas, I'm sure we all have our own flavor. For me, it's not liking food. For Elaine, it's, some discomfort around asking for money, whatever. But it's like, it's going back to last chapter, like, it's touching our thorns every time we experience that. And in this chapter, like he says, you're on page 160 for me. Once you can face your disturbances, you will realize that there's a layer of pain seated deep in the core of your heart. This pain is so uncomfortable, so challenging, and so destructive to the individual self that your entire life is spent avoiding it. Your entire personality is built upon ways of being, thinking, acting, and believing that were developed to avoid this pain. And when I think about my picky eating thing and look back at my 52 years, well, maybe the first 2 years I wasn't so bad, but the last 50 years anyway, it's like, oh yeah, like, I've totally managed my life avoiding that. To the point, like, I can think of examples of, like, friendships I didn't pursue, relationships I didn't pursue, jobs I wouldn't pursue, trips I wouldn't take, invitations to people's houses for dinner, all kinds of crazy bullshit.
You would have been a great chef. Greg.
Yeah.
When you were reading that sentence, you were talking about the pain in the heart. What occurs to me is it's as though it's the pain of me. So whenever that thorn that it touches the pain of me, it's who I am, and the feeling of that is I need to avoid at all costs.
Yeah.
And so much of life, all of us don't pursue or avoid to avoid that feeling of me, or you avoid the feeling of the pain of me. And it's all made up and constructed, but it doesn't look like it when it comes up.
Mm. Mm.
I had this experience on Thursday. That was a big holiday here, and it was our first major snowstorm. We got between 4 and 8 inches, which is really quite a bit of snow, and it needs to be managed. It's not like a dusting of snow. And it was on a major holiday where so many people need to drive. And so I got to where I was going, and it wasn't bad. But on the way back, the highway was so slippery. I can't even tell you how slippery it was. I had my winter tires on. I was prepared, and yet it was a very difficult drive. And I thought of this chapter as I was driving. I could be afraid of how slippery it is, or I could just relax into that and take it however I had to take it in the moment. And it was a really interesting experience. I just went one exit on the interstate, then I got off and took back roads the whole way home. And it took a long time, but it was much safer. But it was an interesting experience. That fear is so real. And yet I chose not to jump into it. It was a much different drive. Yes, it was dangerous. Yes, I slipped around a little bit, but I just took it in stride. And I also made a smart decision not to continue on the interstate at the same time.
Wondering, Vanessa, if the decision you made was like able to happen because you were already kind of just settling into it, as you said.
Yeah, I think that that possibility might have been there even if I did jump into the fear, but it was just so obvious to me. Just get off the interstate. This isn't working.
Yeah.
It's interesting how when we are talking about fear, like when you're driving, Vanessa and Greg, you were talking about things you didn't pursue. We're talking about avoiding emotions, right? And how pain and these discomfort or awful emotions, they're synonymous. Like these emotions we're trying to avoid versus the pain we're trying to avoid. It's like the pain of the fear, pain of the embarrassment or humiliation or shame. And I'm just reflecting how in the context of avoiding pain, we're actually trying to avoid the pain of these emotions. And it's different for person to person as well.
Yeah, I think they're connected for sure. He says somewhere, what did he say? All of your thoughts and feelings are altered by our fears. Yeah.
I'm reflecting on Greg, you're sharing the things you didn't pursue, and where he says, you'll come to see that any behavior pattern based upon the avoidance of pain becomes a doorway to the pain itself. Like, that really landed for me, and I'm going, how many things I do and don't, and if I just take a pause and hear them or and see them, I can very easily track them down to that personal pain I'm trying to avoid. And playing with that, what blew me away was it's so following the behaviors to their root is one thing, but also following the train of thoughts to their root. So our thinking that happens those automatic thinking and unconscious thinking, they also have a root of trying to avoid that personal pain as well. It becomes a whole different ball game when we begin to look at it that way, as opposed to getting caught up in it.
My favorite sentence in the whole chapter was, do you actually think resisting pain will get it to go away, or will get the situation to work out differently, or, whatever. When I think of it like that, I just want to jump into the pain and go through it, because resisting or avoiding or getting lost in it is not going to help the situation, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that's pretty clear.
Or even trying to find a solution at the same level of thinking.
Yeah.
Is in another one of the sentences that I underlined was like, which kind of made me laugh. It said, do you have any idea how many things can cause inner pain and disturbance? Probably more than there are stars in the sky. Like, so you think, well, what's the point? Let's drop this. Like, drop it. That's, when we can't even count the stars in the sky. So in that light, it becomes endless. It's endless and circular as well, repetitive. Which to me just said like that, at that point, if we talk about, things change when the current level of understanding changes. But that for me is like key to that, because indeed there's no point clinging on, as you say, resisting pain. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it makes all the sense when we're caught up in our humanity, though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And how often do we forget it? And yeah.
But then just slightly after that, he says, you must look inside yourself and determine that from now on, pain is not a problem. It's just a thing in the universe. I love that.
I love how he talks about the universe and stuff, and the perspective of how small we are. It's like he says, you're just standing on a little ball of dirt and spinning around one of the stars. From that perspective, do you really care what people think about your clothes or your car? You really need to feel embarrassed if you forget someone's name. It's like, the thing that we in the moment, when we're caught up in them, look so big and so important and so critical to our okayness. But if you can for a second just remember, we're just spinning around on a little speck of dirt. Doesn't really matter.
I love this sentence also. You cannot spend your life avoiding things that are not actually happening.
Yeah.
It takes me back to your story. Go ahead, Chris.
No, you go ahead. Sorry.
Sure. It takes me back to your story, Vanessa, where you knew the fear was real, but I interpreted as what you were saying, but you knew at some level it wasn't true. Like it wasn't happening.
Right. It was more, I chose not to get lost in it or to give it any energy.
Yeah.
It was definitely real.
Yeah, absolutely. And when in that sentence when I said it's not happening, the fear is not reflecting something's actually taking place. Like, so for an example, sometimes when I'm driving at night on the highway, and particularly in the remote countryside, there's just not a lot of street lights, and it's just your headlights, and you can't see a lot. And even with high beam, you actually don't get a very clear view, particularly if the fog's present. And there's the fear there, but the fear is not really about what's going on. The fear is about all these things I'm projecting onto that could happen.
That could happen,
which is
exactly. Yeah.
which is not happening. And so just to know that, yeah, the fear is real, but it's actually those things I'm imagining is actually not true right now, you know. Um, yeah, Greg, you were
My
going to
daughter
say.
sent a meme to us last night on Instagram. It says, and this isn't her writing, this is just something she shared. It says, "Hey, sorry for being so anxious earlier. I had no idea everything would be fine." Like somehow
Yes,
it's easy to imagine everything not being okay,
I'm getting
uh,
lost in that.
and how rare it is for us to like just. And I think that's what Singer's pointing to. That's what Sid Banks is pointing to, is that everything is fine. You can handle reality.
Yeah.
I really like what she wrote to you, because in saying that, and I can't remember the exact words, like I didn't know everything would be fine. It goes to show that clarity in her, like when she knows everything is fine, she's fine.
Yeah.
It's when, we actually innocently thinking the fear is actually happening, that's when it all goes to the pieces. So.
I like how Singer reminds us too that there's a choice to be made. He says one choice is to leave the pain inside and continue to struggle with the outside. The other choice is to decide that you don't want to spend your entire life avoiding the inner pain. You'd rather get rid of it. You can actually live a life full of interesting experiences and just enjoy these experiences, whatever they are. In essence, you can simply live your life and experience what it's like to be on a planet that is spinning around the middle of nowhere until you die.
It takes me back to that notion of psychological fitness, and how they talk about, when you train, when you train, your fitness, you can endure a lot more activity with much ease and much grace. The same way when we, and I remember this really old, long time colleague, he talks about like when you go to the gym, you got to break your muscles and then they get stronger, etc. Just reminds me, like when we actually have that courage or curiosity and faith to go through the pain, it's like that psychological muscle breaks, but it actually builds. So next time that same pain or similar pain comes up, the system knows, oh, I can handle this. It's not knowing that we can handle it is half the time. Maybe you all get into trouble. I certainly get into trouble, I find. But the capacity is there in all of us.
I mean, what I get from that exercise metaphor is just the repetitions, right? Like it's, and I'm thinking of, early in my career, wasn't such a fan of public speaking, did a whole bunch of public speaking. Now it's not a problem. Like it's, that repetition. I recently, this will be probably humiliating and hilarious at the same time, but I recently conquered blueberry yogurt. I accidentally bought blueberry yogurt, but once I ate it, I don't know, a dozen times, now I've conquered blueberry yogurt.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's on my page 105, there's a paragraph that to me it sounded like a complete yoga lesson. Now I've avoided yoga for most of my life. I've attempted to do yoga on many occasions, and just considering how my excuse is always, oh, I can't do this. I can't sit still for that long. I can't get into that pose. I can't do any of this and all this breathing, carrying on with this lark. I can't be bothered to do that. I'm not going to do that. As I read the paragraph, and I'll read it. So when you feel pain, simply view it as energy. Just start seeing these inner experiences as energy passing through your heart and before the eye of your consciousness. Then relax. do the opposite of contracting and closing. And I guess he's speaking of the samskara here, the heart samskara, closing, opening, letting everything flow. And he says, relax and release. Relax your heart until you're actually face to face with the exact place where it hurts. Stay open and receptive so you can be present right where the tension is. You must be willing to be present right at the place of the tightness and pain, and then relax and go even deeper. That speaks to me of going through it, like you were saying, Vanessa, just sort of being there, being aware with it, and just sticking with it kind of thing. It's okay. It's going to be okay. And he says, this is a very deep growth and transformation. But you will not want to do this. Here's me. You will feel tremendous resistance to doing this. And that's what makes it so powerful. As you relax and feel the resistance, the heart will want to pull away, to close, to protect, and to defend itself. Keep relaxing. Relax your shoulders and relax your heart. Let go and give room for the pain to pass through you. It's just energy. Just see it as energy and let it go. Just as I could feel my whole body just sort of, oh, this is like, I'm in a safe space here. I can do this. It's okay. And I suddenly had an urge to do yoga because it makes sense, because these are the kind of exercises that they do in a yoga class with the breathing, and you just, whatever they visualize, it just comes in and then you let it out again and carry on breathing and sit in the pose and relax and open your heart and all of that stuff. And I realized that my difficulty in actually even attempting to go to a yoga class is resistance. I don't want to not, at that point, I didn't not want to feel the pain. I want the pain to be there, because that's the only thing I know. So what will happen if I don't have any pain? But, that's kind of frightening in itself. But now, as you were saying, Asakna, it's when you have the knowing, sort of the knowing of how it works, then it's like a guiding hand that can help you through. And that's what that paragraph sort of pointed me to. Thinking sometimes yoga teachers, let's say or at least in my experience, they don't kind of explain all this to you. You're just kind of doing some kind of exercise and breathing and visualizing things, and you're in a class and you can't sort of say, well, I don't like this at all. And but reading this, it makes it so clear and makes so much sense to me now. What the point of, let's say, an exercise like yoga is. It's very deep and very profound.
I'm just reflecting about how he talks about how our physical body is naturally inclined to avoid pain. Like if it touches something hot, or like it protects itself, like by pulling away, etc., which is really helpful, really useful. And the mind does the same thing. If there's a pain comes up, it wants to, which is, I think, natural. What's curious for me, and I think I haven't fully articulated this, so I'll just let the words flow. I'm going back to what, Greg, you were talking about when you were getting the tattoos. Like, you had the destination of having the tattoos, so the pain wasn't so much of a focus. And same with Vanessa, with the practice with the trapeze and all of that. It's like when the destination is somewhere else, or there's a benefit, we don't focus on the pain. So I'm just going back to with the mind. If we knew that, and I think this is what you were sharing, Elaine, and I'm just seeing it from a different window where, well, if I knew that, I think I'm getting it. So he talks about at some point where there is tremendous joy, beauty, love, and peace within you, but they're on the other side of the pain. on the other side of pain is ecstasy. On the other side is freedom. So I guess if we really have seen that, or when we have really seen that and touched that, then we know there's something beyond the pain. And I think continuing with what you were sharing, Elaine, when we know how this system works, the mechanics of it, then there's opportunity for us to have less resistance to it, to psychological pain. I hope that made sense. I went in a few directions there.
I think that what I heard you say is when you know the structure of how it works, that gives you more freedom to make a different choice on how you, if you're afraid of the pain or you just accept the pain and go through it. I mean, it does for me, having read this book and worked with you guys, knowing the structure really helps me make a different choice in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something about, I guess, the knowing and knowing that there is an alternative, rather than you said, Vanessa, about, I mean, for a long time, I could never get, like, I would intellectually understand the sense of spirit, let's say. And then again, various meditations and teachings, and even the Bible will say, we'll talk about acceptance. But I would be saying to myself, well, hang on a minute, I don't see why I have to accept all this nonsense kind of thing. And it's because I didn't have another framework to work out of. Why should I accept something just because Buddha tells me so? And I never got that. But now I can actually see where, let's say, the great spiritual teachers of all times, like Buddha and the gurus and what have you, they're actually working from a structure. They're not working from where I think perhaps the word energy at some point can be misleading, because it's often associated with the word formless. But indeed, there is somehow, to me, I'm just talking off the top of my head, somehow, as you said it there, both Asakna and Vanessa, it becomes a structure and it makes sense. Somehow, whether I've made up the structure, it actually doesn't matter, because at this point it works. But the idea of formless energy is difficult for a mere human being like me to kind of grasp onto.
What I was feeling with what you were sharing, Elaine, was that, like, you have realized the structure and the mechanics of how it works. It's not just a concept. And that realization embodies it for you. It's not just read in a book, or somebody said something.
I've seen it.
Right.
That's the I guess the point. Yes, that's true. Yes, I think so. That, and I guess that will take us back to the feeling, which is where all the truth lies, kind of thing. Whichever way you look at it. The thoughts in our head that just make a lot of noise, but at the end of the day, it's the feeling that we need to be looking at. Let's see where that takes us.
On page 171 for me, it says, sometimes you'll notice that it feels hot inside as pain passes. Learn to enjoy that burning. It's called the fire of yoga. It does not seem enjoyable, but you will learn to enjoy it because it's freeing you. In truth, pain is the price of freedom. And the moment you're willing to pay the price, you'll no longer be afraid. And, that had me thinking about the tattoo. Like, there are areas where you're being tattooed that it feels like you're on fire, literally. But you know, in some sick way, you learn to enjoy it. I mean, often people have tattoos will tell you it's almost addicting, like to go through that experience. But it's to me, there's like that hopefulness here in terms of learning to enjoy this process of passing through the pain, knowing that the payoff behind it is freedom.
I don't know why, but I'm thinking of Christ on the cross and the reasons that he ended up there, being nailed to a cross and suffering and this kind of thing, which there must be, and I'm not very genned up on biblical things at all, but it just seems to reflect, what you're saying, Greg. The price is suffering, but it's worth it, kind of thing. That's perhaps maybe what he was trying to show us, Christ, through his suffering, that he would have then resorted. He would be coming back after that, which is sort of, to me, kind of metaphorically going through that pain to be reborn, to another just thought dropped into my head. And again, I have very little religious knowledge.
No, well, I think your point's well taken. That, I mean, again, I'm not an expert on any religion really, but it seems to me like there's a consistency in terms of this sentiment of suffering and pain is the price of freedom, like going through this this process. I mean, I think that's like the heart of the human experience is, I think earlier, I don't know if it was this chapter or the other chapter, but he quoted Buddha said, all life is suffering.
Yeah.
All life is suffering when we're resisting the pain, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because if we were open to it, and I'm just reflecting even the word pain, what that conjures up in mind, and I often find with people when I'm exploring things, we introduce the word intensity or intense. It's like, wow, this is a really intense experience. This is an intense emotion. This is an intense reality. It takes away all the connotations, all the baggage associated with pain. How even the words, the way how it's been used and weighed upon. And this is akin to how Micheal Singer talks about it's just energy. So if it is an intensity, it just has a different opening to it, different relation to it.
Jamie Smart says, it's all about how we organize and relate to our experiences. And in the realm of resistance, just the other day I was watching Jamie do something where he was talking about he has no resistant clients, and then he does a demonstration and people are like, they were resisting you the whole time. He's like, oh, I didn't even notice. Because he doesn't organize and relate his experience in that way.
Yeah.
So to what I got from what you said, Asakna, was how subjective pain is to each of us. Like it's not a given or a constant. It's a variable based on I suppose in a principles way of the principle of thought taking form in the moment. Is this experience causing pain or not? Well, depends on how you relate to it.
Yeah. So our orientation to the pain itself.
So what I'm getting is pain is just an experience. It's like hearing a bird sing.
Yeah.
And it's the fear about the experience or the judgment that causes disturbance.
Yeah.
So driving in the snow under very slippery conditions, yes, that's dangerous. But if you don't get lost in the fear of what could happen and just stay in the now, that's the difference.
Yeah.
Same with Asakna, you driving in the fog. You can't
Mm.
see what's ahead of you, not very far,
Mm.
but you're fine
Mm.
most of the time. It is a real danger, but you're aware of it. And, you know, if something happened, either to me driving in the snow or you in the fog, you would have the resilience to deal with it.
Mm.
Yeah.
And
I'm
the
thinking-
fear isn't going to help you.
Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, I'm done.
Sorry. Vanessa.
That's okay.
Yeah, and taking back to some of our earlier experiences with Jamie, you know, how that information that is we're talking about is fear. So could it be rejection or anger or anything you like, really, or falling off a trapeze? I don't know. But actually, is it not just we're extraordinarily lucky to be able to feel pain because it's telling us something. And it's telling us that, like, you know, where Jamie's example is when you're driving through fog, as you said, Asakna, you know, what happens? You hit the rumble strips. And what do? You get back on track. Is that not the same thing? So it kind of a turnaround is to see the pain as a gift. It's telling you something. It's also telling you you're still alive, if nothing else.
It's when we use the experience of pain to construct castles and empires and all these different realities. That's when I think we innocently get lost in it. But if we can see it for what it is, it's the price for freedom.
Yeah.
There's 4 parts of the last paragraph I highlighted, which I'll read to close out. It says that this is the core of spiritual work. When you're comfortable with pain passing through you, you will be free. If you do not care, if you are no longer afraid of yourself, you are free. Eventually, you will understand that there is an ocean of love behind all of this fear and pain. When you pass beyond the layer of pain, you will finally be free from the binds of the psyche.
Yeah.
It occurs to me that at some level, there's a fear of freedom itself, right? Like, I don't know if that's like the unknown. You'd think of that as the unknown or however but it's like there's this prize at the end of this tunnel is freedom. But then the psyche kicks in and goes, oh yeah, but you know, that freedom thing, that's overrated, or you know, you don't know what that's all about. That might be more scary than dealing with this stuff. So
yeah, once we go back into comparing something with something else anyway, it's going to happen. Like, oh my goodness, if I'm free, you know, what do the rest of my family say? You know, they might not like me anymore because I'm just so happy and wonderful. I can't do that.
We just replaced it with a different pain.
Yes.
Well, next time we're on to part 4, going beyond, in chapter 12, taking down the walls. So we talked a lot about the structure today. Curious to see how taking down the walls relates to that. Thanks for a great discussion, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. That's great.